Hi, everyone. My name is Philippa Hughes, and I'm the director of Looking for America. Normally, Looking for America organizes bipartisan conversations all over the country, bringing people together to break bread and have conversations about the issues of the day and what does it mean to be American. We thought we'd try something different this time. We partnered up with the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and they are a social democratic organization in Germany. And they wanted to hear from real Americans. What are real Americans saying about our current politics and discourse leading up to the election? And we are focusing a little bit more on people who lean on the left this time. And we're going to be talking to two amazing people from Texas. And we chose, we've been going around to several states around the country that we believe are battleground states, or states that are kind of starting to lean more, or either swing places, or they're starting to trend more to the left, and wondering what people in those states are thinking about. So today we've got two awesome two friends of mine, Angel Cabrales, who's from El Paso, Texas, and Stephen Sweeney, who lives outside of Houston, who is a longtime dear friend. So thank you both for being here and having a conversation with us. And you know, we'd like to get to know you a little bit better. Would you introduce yourselves? Angel, would you mind starting?
Sure. I am a multimedia sculptor and sculpture professor at UT El Paso. I'm actually talking to you from the inside of a truck because I had to travel to Odessa, Texas for an exhibition out here. So I'm using actually the Wi-Fi from this truck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I grew up in El Paso, and I like making work that creates conversations about current issues in the U.S.
For our German audience who might not understand the geography of Texas, would you explain sort of where El Paso is in relation to the rest of Texas? Because it is kind of interesting.
Texas is huge, and El Paso is the very most western part, that little itty bitty corner of Texas that's the furthest west. We are so far west that we are not in the same time zone as the rest of the state. We're actually in mountain time, whereas the rest of the state is in central, and it would take me 12 hours to travel from El Paso to the other side of Texas to Houston.
It's a big state.
It's a big state.
We're going to come back to this, but I also want to mention that El Paso is literally on the border and has a sort of sister city, across the river. And so I think that's going to be important for our conversation for people to know.
Okay.
Stephen, will you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Stephen Sweeney. I live in Southeast Houston, which is actually on I-10, about 850 miles from we know that's what it says on the signs. I grew up here in Houston, in an area southeast near NASA. So if people know that the Johnson Space Center is in Southeast Houston, and that's mission control for the manned space flights since the 60s. And so I grew up in a community with a lot of people who are not from Houston, right? A lot of engineers and contractors and astronauts' families who lived in that area of town and were associated with the space program. And I did move away for a long time, and that's where Philip and I met each other 30 years ago or so, but did find my way back, right? Not by choice, but by opportunity. And I don't live very far from where I actually grew up in Southeast Houston. And
Wow.
And I'm a small business owner, I guess, in the information technology space. So I'm here at my office. We run a skeleton crew here since the COVID. Most people are working from home, but I've been coming in and for pretty much since the very beginning. Other than the 2 weeks when one of our sons had COVID, and we were all kind of quarantining for a couple of weeks. So, but other than that, I've been coming in, and I live in a very, very conservative area of town. So Houston is like like a lot of large cities, it is more blue, and in the central part of town, and more red in the outskirts. But I happen to live in a district that actually was Ron Paul's old congressional district. So it kind of covers Galveston and Lake Jackson, and in some ways it's more libertarian, than necessarily Republican. But in terms of looking around, I mean, you don't see many Biden anythings in the area that I live in. It's very, very, very red. Yeah. Which makes it a challenge, right? To be maybe more progressive or left leaning, and be in business, and with not a lot of neighbors that would necessarily align with my thinking. So.
Oh, interesting. Well, you brought up something that I kind of want to chat about. You said that one of your sons had COVID. I'm glad he recovered. I actually had COVID too back in March, and it was not a pleasant experience at all. And one of the things I kind of worried about that, even though well over 200,000 people have died, until President Trump got COVID, I felt like people started to kind of forget about it, and we're kind of putting it out of their brains. And then at town hall, they, Savannah Guthrie really hammered him, asking him, like, when did you know, when did you know you had COVID? How, when were you tested? Of course, he wouldn't answer. Do you think that people in Texas are, what are people thinking about COVID in Texas and the president's handling of it? At least in your communities.
In our communities. Well, I think generally people have gone along with the mask order. I don't see many people who are rejecting that. But I think that people are generally at this point, I don't know, ignoring is not the right term. I mean, I think that they're trying to accommodate the situation, and they want to resume some normalcy, eating out and things like that. And they're willing to take some inconveniences and do some things a little bit differently. But it is not at all, maybe what we saw or heard in some like in the Northeast or in California or in New York and some European countries where things were really like locked down. Right? I mean, Houston really only locked down for maybe a month or so, and then gradually started, relaxing restrictions. So, I'm not sure if that quite answers your question, but I mean, I think people are again, they're cognizant of it, and they're being careful, but there's not a willingness to just sit at home. Not that's not a popular view here.
Yeah. Angel?
That's El Paso's actually having problems right now, where we just had 1,900 infections in 8 days.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, and it's a little shocking, because we were doing so well, and then suddenly it just burst, just this past week, and the city's trying to figure out how to get it back under control. And then coming out here to Odessa, I've actually been a little freaked out because so many people are not wearing masks out here. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's damaging their ego, their manliness. I had to go to Home Depot and just watched people walking in where it said mandatory mask, walk by the lady who was checking, and then taking it right off as they walked past her.
Wow.
And I was just kind of like, all right, I'm gonna go get the bolts that I need right away, and I'm out. And I bought a spray sanitizer while I was there, and I was just walking around spraying as I walked through. Yeah, no, El Paso was doing really well, and now I feel like we're spiking again.
I mean, I think there are a lot of spikes happening all over the country right now. So I think our second wave appears to be on its way. Yeah. I guess what I was really, the one thing I was trying to get at is like, do people even care about what President Trump has done or hasn't done with regard to COVID? Is anybody even talking about that? Like, I feel like here in DC, we talk about it a lot. Like, I cannot believe what a terrible job he's done and he should be voted out. But I wonder if people in the rest of the country are even thinking about his specific handling of the pandemic.
I hear a lot of misinformation, from, not people who I would consider left leaning, right? I mean, the people who are on the other side of things, you know, trying to justify, not wearing masks, right? Whether it's mental health related or it doesn't work. I mean, definitely buying into the misinformation, or what I consider to be misinformation, buying it wholesale. And then others like us and some of our other neighbors were like, really, that's what you think is the right approach? But to the extent that some of these folks are very, 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 very Republican, and they're very, very behind Trump. It would seem to me that it really doesn't matter what he says. They're gonna, how outrageous it is, or how much it doesn't make sense. I mean, they're right in line with it. So
I've had conversations with people here in Odessa, and they are very much Trump supporters. But and I was talking to them about, well, what's the harm in wearing that mask, in possibly protecting somebody you love? And funny enough, sorry, my brother keeps texting me and I keep telling him I'm busy. Okay. Funny enough, I had a friend that I hadn't spoken to since high school graduation, called me out of the blue from a burner phone that he had, and which was weird. It was a really weird conversation because he was worried about COVID, but at the same time not sure about masks and if he should be taking these things seriously. And it was weird to talk to somebody that we went to school almost 25 years ago and talk to him for 2 hours about why it's important to wear a mask, and convince him to stop going on Reddit and reading what other people are posting. It's like, you can actually find real information and not go through chat rooms and get your information from a chat room.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, I find it very frustrating, again, and so I think part of the reason why I'm interested in having these conversations personally is because I know, like I was saying before, I know we're having different kinds of conversations in DC because everybody talks about politics all the time. Every conversation ends up being about politics. And so, kind of along the lines of talking about Reddit, another question that Savannah Guthrie hammered the president on last night was she wanted him to denounce QAnon and denounce all these conspiracy theories, especially he retweets conspiracy theories. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't denounce, particularly he wouldn't denounce QAnon. And I was just curious, do people you kind of mentioned, Stephen, that there's people with misinformation. I mean, are people around you buying into these sort of conspiracy theories that can you tell, or is anybody talking about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think more than I would care to admit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And maybe, some people who are just willing to pass it along, even if, they don't necessarily believe it, but it reinforces a position, right? Or even is provocative, I feel like, there's an attitude of, okay, so it might tick people off, but hey, we're gonna pass along anyway, right? It might not be true, but it's, provocative, and, very, in a lot of ways, immature. I don't really understand why they get passed along, because, people, I don't know, that I think that they really believe it, but, it's not, it's a very uncomfortable, unseemly thing to see, right? When someone you care about, or something known for a long time, passing along something that they can't possibly really believe it, but
right,
we'll just pass along, just without a hesitation. And unfortunately, I end up snoozing a lot of people on Facebook, right? I mean, I just don't want to see it anymore, because it's just a steady stream of junk. So I don't unfriend them anymore, but I will snooze whatever they're passing, because it's just filling up my my pages.
Are you seeing it, Angel, in your friend group or?
I see a couple, but not a lot. I guess I have a lot of left-leaning friends. Well, I mean, when you're in the art world, right? Uh, but no, I mean, I have some, and like I said, I had a friend call me from a burner phone, so he was very much into conspiracy theories, and I believe he's probably going on to the chans and reading what people were saying there, because that's where it's really bad. And I've actually poked into him a couple of times just to see for my own artistic research, and then going, yeah, no, you in this, I don't want to be in here. But it's not to the extreme where I do snooze. I have snoozed a couple of friends in that respect, but I'm not seeing a lot of it. I think maybe El Paso's pretty chill, so much so that it's a problem in voting. And I was actually really proud on the first day of early voting to see the lines in El Paso really, really long. It took me an hour and a half just to vote, and I was there at 8:30, which meant a lot to me. El Paso has not been known for voting, and the last elections for Beto, they actually came out and voted, and actually this year there's already, I think it's like twice the amount of registered voters, which is a big deal in El Paso. So we're really, really trying to get people out to vote, and really trying to like stop the misinformation that comes out. We did have a Trump supporting rally drive through El Paso, which was strange, because I know there are some supporters in El Paso, but we don't really see that many of them.
Yeah, we've had a few small, like we live in a kind of a city just outside of Houston called Friendswood, and we've had a few Trump rallies in Friendswood in the city park, like on the weekend. With I don't know how many hundred people, but there's definitely there's enthusiasm right around here. It's great to hear that you're seeing motivation to get out and vote, because that is, I think that is one of the bigger problems, is that that there are plenty of people who are progressive or left leaning, but if they stay home or they don't register, and then
right.
It doesn't really matter. So I think if I remember correctly from the last presidential race, that there were plenty of support in these swing states, but people just didn't get out and vote, and that would have been the difference by itself.
Well, and that's one of the things that was heartbreaking. That's one of the things that was heartbreaking when Beto O'Rourke was running, and he only lost by 200 some thousand votes, and the amount of registered voters that were in El Paso, there was 200 some thousand El Paso registered voters that did not vote.
Really?
And there's the difference.
Yeah. and I was just kind of like, we could have had that, but and in that respect, that's why I'm trying to do I'm doing an event tomorrow to try to get people to vote in El Paso.
Right. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So back in 2017, I had an event called A Hole in One, and it was a interactive art installation making commentary on our 45th president and the comments he'd made about other countries. So I made golf greens in the shapes of countries with their capitals as the holes, and each green was titled, it was a quote from the president, and you as the viewer were allowed to walk up and tee off from a red America or a blue America, and you could sit in an armchair, and you would pick up what I called the executive orders, which was a golf ball launching gun, and you would fire golf balls at the golf greens, and then start talking about what we're doing here. So I'm making a third iteration of it this time called A Hole in One, the battlegrounds. And so I've taken the battleground states and I've turned them into golf greens, and the capitals again are the holes. And people are encouraged to come and try to help decide the fate of our nation by firing at the battleground states. But in order to play, you have to have voted early, and your payment is your I voted sticker. And it's been really great because just in announcing it uh, just this last week, uh, I've already seen people popping up holding their I voted stickers, talking about how they're waiting for the event on Saturday. And we're going to run this from the 17th until election day, so people can still come and play. So
That is awesome. I want to do that.
come on down.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm really excited about it. It's something I was like, this should be fun, and it should encourage people. So
one of the things that we talked a lot about when I came to El Paso for the bipartisan dinner was immigration. Could we talk about that a little bit? I mean, is anybody, again, I feel like nobody's really talking about the really important issues anymore, because all we care about is whether President Trump had COVID or not, or whatever. I mean, is that still seems like a very salient issue in Texas, and particularly.
oh yeah.
So what's the conversation like?
Well, in El Paso, it's always been an issue, even before Trump, even while Obama was president, when Bush was there. It's always been an issue with us. The show I actually have here in Odessa is about immigration, and I was really nervous about talking about that here in Odessa because, like I said, Odessa is very much Trump country. There's very few cars here and many big trucks everywhere, and MAGA hats, and yet I showed these pieces here, and I had a talk about the artwork yesterday, and it was actually really well received, which I was a little scared about. But a big issue that I was talking about was that, look, you can have your views on immigration and everything, but the biggest thing for me is not to hit you over the head and tell you how you should think, but put an issue in front of you so that we can discuss it. And maybe we can find a middle ground so that we can move forward. And so the issue I was putting in front of them in regards to immigration was the dehumanization of people. And that actually got people talking at the talk yesterday. When I asked questions, I think I answered more questions than I spent talking about the work, which I felt was a really good thing and something that really needs to be done. But I'm very sad because, like you said, people were, let's talk about Trump and COVID, and we have such a sensationalist, tendency within our media and things like that. It's like, this is the next big thing that we should talk about, and the real issues are sidelined because this is the wow factor right now. But I think it's important to never lose sight of those actual issues and continue to bring them back up. Even if it has to be in a manner that, kind of sneaks it back in a way. So.
Yeah. So we have three kids, right? The youngest is senior in high school. The oldest is 21, one in between, and two are left leaning, and one is right leaning. And
wow,
one of the things that I've found, maybe it's just like a microcosm, but like the right doesn't want to talk about ideas. Like, they don't want to win arguments on ideas. And I don't think that was always the case. And I know it wasn't always the case in my lifetime. And, right now, it's really hard to have a discussion on any issues because there's no ideas coming from the other side. I mean, there really isn't. And, it feels like talking to a wall. There's nothing. You can put an idea out there or ask a provocative question, something to make someone think, and you don't get back, a plan, a pros and cons. You don't really get much of anything. It just feels very emotional and defensive, and kind of screw you, right? I mean, that it's hard. It's like, and you could pick immigration as a topic. You could pick others as well. It seems like it's almost like the same story, different verse. That you try to have a discussion about ideas, and you want to win, right? You want your idea to win or find a winning idea, and like there's no ideas coming back. So whoa, I just went dark. Got to move around in here. In a nutshell, I think it is on the right. It's an issue that is really turned emotional, right? It's a we need to take care of ourselves first, right? We don't need to be spending money on providing XYZ service to people who aren't legal residents, and there is a law that needs to be followed. Which there's just not a lot of creativity into how to make anything better, right? It's more about breaking things down, right? Breaking down institutions that might be useful or helpful in handling things better, and not a lot of progression in any positive direction.
Yeah, I mean, I see that too with the healthcare. Like, what is your healthcare plan? Like, we want to get rid of Obamacare, but the president keeps promising a healthcare plan that doesn't seem to materialize. So,
for years, and I guess I'm sure both of you have seen the Republican platform from the convention, right?
What?
The non-platform?
Like, what platform?
And I don't know how much the rest of the country really pays attention or cares, but that is such a stark situation where you have an entire two branches of our government, or 1.5 branches of our government, that you don't have a plan or aren't willing to put forth a plan, right? To let us know what that plan is. That's, to me, it's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, and I feel that's a big part of it. It's instead of actually putting a plan forward, it's more about winning. It's over competitive. It's so competitive. It's like, it doesn't matter what your idea is. I want to win, which means I have to be against you. But that's also what I've seen happen in the US for decades. We have to have we have to have an enemy to fight against, instead of trying to work together to benefit mankind. It's like we need that competition, that enemy to fight against, so that we can move forward. And that's a terrible way to think, because all you do is alienate everyone.
It is, and that's what has driven these gerrymandering and really election practices that are marginalizing people who have other ideas, and the stakes are really high. The stakes are very, very high. They're high every 4 years. They're high, or particularly high in coming out of a census, and I do hope, it's a big hope, but I hope that if the left, the Democrats do prevail, that they can actually do some things to prevent this from happening in the future. I don't know how feasible that is, but there are some bigger things that need to happen structurally to move more toward a to what you were saying earlier, working together, right? And to work together, you need a fair process. You also need competition, right? We had a politics professor at UVA who used to say, politics is a good thing, but you have to have competition, right? You have to, because otherwise you just end up with one extreme, right? You have to have competition, and I think we have very non-competitive districts, and that just kills the moderates in the middle. It leaves you in the extremes.
Yep.
We absolutely need competition. I'm not trying to change people on the right to our view of thinking. We need to have that interaction. But as you said, Stephen, the structure doesn't even make the competition possible at this point. It actually skews all the power into one direction. What I worry about, though, is that, let's say Democrats win they actually win the Senate too, which would make it possible to change the structures. But will they change the structures? Because some of that structure benefits it basically benefits whoever has the power.
Yeah.
And so when you have the power, are you going to change it so that it, mitigates your power when you're in power?
Well, and I feel like that's a big problem that happens. It's like, oh, well, you did this while you were in power. Well, I'm in power now, so I'm gonna do it. It's so childlike, because you're no longer thinking about what really benefits the country. It's just like, well, it's my turn now.
Right. Well, and it is, if in the Democratic Party platform, which I read as well, it does have a section that is about free and fair elections. So it's encouraging that it's identified as a problem. It's encouraging that they seem to have, a vision for the way it ought to work. But, again, taking a platform and turning it into, legislation that can actually get not overturned in the courts, that's a whole another issue.
Yeah, totally. And I've thought, I've been thinking a lot about this because I organize these conversations across the political divide. And I do believe that these conversations are critical to our democracy. But at the end of the day, we have to change the structures of power in order to change the dialogue. And that's where sometimes I get a little depressed thinking about do we have the will to make those kind of changes at the top levels? And and then they say, well, we can just vote the bums out, but we don't seem to be taking our voting, well, as we mentioned earlier, we don't seem to be taking our voting power into hand and voting the bums out. If we really believe Congress and our elected officials don't represent us, why aren't we making those changes?
I think that's also from miseducation of a lot of our own population, where they honestly think that it's just the president that will change everything. I've had to talk to my students on many occasions on why they should be voting in their local politics, and always giving them extra credit just for voting. I'm like, just bring me your sticker and I'll give you extra credit. And even then, that's not enough incentive. Because they're like, well, it's not an election year. I'm like, no. Just because the president's not running doesn't mean there aren't other people you have to elect. But with everything that's been happening here in El Paso, it's actually galvanized a lot of the youth in El Paso, where they are protesting more. And I actually have to sit there going, okay, it's great to protest, but you have to take that protest and then you have to incorporate it into your vote. It's not enough to just complain. You have to keep going.
Stephen, so Angel, I actually came to Texas and knocked on doors for Beto in 2018, and I stayed while I was there. And I remember trying to convince his daughter, she had to get out there and vote because it was a non-election, general election year vote, and it was really hard to convince her. I don't even know if she really did. I can't remember, but.
I don't know that she did either. I don't think she did, but she is very motivated this go around.
She is? Okay. That's because that's what I'm wondering. Where are the young people? A lot of the young people were complaining that Bernie didn't get nominated. I'm like, well, whose fault is that? You could have nominated him. So, Stephen, your kids, are they feeling pretty motivated? I guess the youngest isn't old.
Ryan, he just turned 18, so he voted the other day. So he and I both voted early already.
Excellent.
Yeah, Audrey, she's registered, and she just needs to get it done. William, so
I need him to vote.
Well, okay, so here's how passionate we are about exercising civic duty, right? So he's in college up in Fort Worth, and he is he is right leaning. I can imagine which way he will vote, but I did send him an absentee ballot form, which, like a good college student, he did nothing with, and we were actually talking about flying him in to vote, right? So he can come in and vote, even though he will probably vote the other way, but it's important, and
awesome.
We'll bring him in anyway.
Angel, you're around college kids. Are they engaged in any way?
They are. Like I said, I've had, and I think it's because we're artists, and especially after the shooting last year in El Paso. Prior to that, I would give them assignments and they were just making their own artwork. But in the last year, a lot of them have started to make a lot of political work. And I think, as terrible as that shooting was in El Paso, I think it really galvanized them and made them see how these outside forces are impacting our community in the borderlands. Because that guy came from the Dallas area. Like he drove 10 hours, and and that's one of the things I was always telling him, was like, look, you may not realize it because you're in this community and you feel safe, but there's a lot of outside forces within our administration, and it's affecting other people, and it's descending within our community. And so last year, well, actually at the beginning of this year, we had a show at the Chamizal National Memorial Parks Gallery for the students. And I just titled it Borderlands and told them, you're just going to make something in relation to the borderlands. And 80% of them made political works, really talking about the shooting, immigration, and things that were impacting our city. And they've been going out to protest during the Black Lives Matters. They've been going out. Some of them have been stumping for a local mayor here, a woman who's running for mayor here to be the first Latina mayor of El Paso. That she's trying. I hope she gets it.
Is Veronica Escobar running for mayor?
No, it's actually her name is Veronica also, but no, Escobar is our house.
Yeah.
But it's been incredible to see them actually getting galvanized and going out there and voting, and it was really funny, since I'm doing that event, they've been sending me pictures of their I voted stickers, so it's, and then telling their friends, and so it's been really great to see that change here in El Paso.
What do you predict for Texas in the election? Which way is Texas gonna go?
Last I saw, it was pink, but with the way early voting is going, I'm hoping that it turns purple and then hopefully blue.
What's your gut, Stephen?
I mean, honestly, too close to call. It is very encouraging to hear, and I'm going to talk about the motivation and to get out and vote in some of these areas that will reliably vote blue. But it's just hard to imagine. I mean, I just know so many folks who are red, and they are motivated. I mean, they're going to get out and vote. I mean, it's just too close to call for me. I would love to be encouraged and say I think it's going to be blue, but I could be surprised either way, right? I could be surprised if there's it's solidly red. I could be surprised if it flips blue. I mean, either way would be surprising to me at this point.
I do find it encouraging, though, the mass panic that the Republicans had over the first day of voting in Texas.
Did they?
Oh yeah, because there was over 1 million votes on the first day of early voting in Texas, and
so you don't think a lot of those millions were Republican voters? I mean,
no, because they were talking about how a lot of them were new registered voters in towns that didn't typically vote, and they were minority towns.
Interesting.
So
that's interesting.
So that is my hope, that if even if we don't, if we're still leaning to the right, that it's pink, which means it's changing,
right.
And not a hard blood red.
Right, which it has been for a while.
Well, this was, of course, 2 years ago, but I felt like if Beto cannot beat one of the most hated senators in America, it really discouraged me that he couldn't beat Ted Cruz. But that was 2 years ago. Like, a lot's happened since then. So maybe people are coming around.
Well, like right now, I'm really hoping that Hagar will beat Cornyn. You know.
Yeah.
Well, and I had a conversation in the line at the grocery store with an elderly man who, and he struck up the conversation. And I wasn't trying to start a political conversation in the grocery store, but that he was dismayed and that he would probably vote blue this year. That he voted for Trump the first go around, and it had a lot to do with. I guess the two things was they felt like they were playing fun and games with the benefits that were important to him, right? So it would be Medicare primarily, Social Security, and a distrust that there's something going on that it's just not it's not what it should be. Like, a lack of trust in maybe it was inconsistency of messaging and being all over the place and not really having a plan. But that was a pleasant thing to hear, that there might be some folks out there that are flipping. And this was early on. This was several months ago. So
interesting. Well, that does give me a little hope. What do you want?
No, go ahead, please.
What do you want people in Germany to know about Texas?
Texans?
Well, I mean, especially in El Paso, we're super friendly. You come to El Paso, we meet you, and we'll introduce you to our parents. We'll take you home. We'll feed you. We'll send you home with tamales. You're going home with stuff. I mean, you become family. And that's why I love El Paso so much. I've lived all over Texas, and I was so happy to get a position at UTEP and move back home. I love Texas, but I think El Paso is, to me, my favorite city in Texas. Sorry, Steve.
I've actually never been there. I've never been that. I've heard really nice things about it. Yeah, I mean, they've all learned that it's very big, and I would concur that it is a very friendly state, and you have a lot of people from a lot of different places. That it's not entirely homogeneously Texans, right? People, a lot of imports. I've spent time in Dallas and Houston and San Antonio and Austin, and you meet a lot of people from a lot of different places, and I think people are very genuinely happy, good people to know. And I don't know, I would like to think that that's everywhere in the U.S., but I guess I can't say because I don't really know.
I do love when I'm walking anywhere in Texas and I see someone walking toward me. Person will look and they'll nod and they'll smile as we walk by. We won't even know who we are, but we'll just be like, and just say hi. And I think that's very distinctly Texan.
I think and this may not be only Texan thing, but I think there's a high degree of self-reliance in Texas.
Yes.
I think that people, and it's probably one of the reasons why you can have a libertarian, right-leaning attitudes, that the people take care of themselves, they take care of their business. I mean, I'm not saying say law and order necessarily, but they feel like they can do things on their own, that they don't need a lot from their government, right? And it's something I see in other southern states as well. Most of my family is actually from Louisiana, and South Louisiana, and I see that a lot there too. Is that they just don't expect a lot, and that's part of the problem, is that they need to expect more. And there's like in a lot of ways they vote against their self-interest because there's more that could be done, that would help these communities, and they're not participating in the stock market. So there are things that need to be available, social programs, but they don't tend to vote for their self-interest as much as you think. I think because they feel like they can get it on their own, right? And they don't like the idea of other people just getting, right, just receiving without having earned. And it's an interesting. I mean, it's great. It's great, that Texas has this sort of independent spirit, right? But it does have some undesirable consequences.
Yeah. Well, I love Texas. I enjoyed my visit to El Paso so much. I was totally taken into people's homes, so I can attest to that. And I've been taken into Stephen's home, so I appreciate that. So thank you so much both for being here. I think that it's really important for people to hear our voices because, you know, our voices are often filtered through media and politicians, and they're not saying the things that we're saying. So really appreciate you sharing your real world views with the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So before we go off, I want to take a quick picture. I've had a cat sitting here on my lap. So I feel like it's like my little guest. Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, great to see you both. I hope to see you in real life someday, one of these days soon.
Hope so.
No.
I'm sad I missed when you came.
I know, but I'll come back and we'll eat tamales. So
definitely.
Okay.
Well, are you thinking about a trip down Houston? Did you mention maybe that you might be heading this way at some point?
Well, yeah, I have a lot of family in Houston, you know, Vietnamese family. So my mom is actually thinking about moving closer to my uncle who lives there. So for sure. But I do, you know, what we're trying to do with the Looking for America is go back to all the communities that we had gone to. So, I mean, when we can travel again and when we get the funding, I will definitely be back to El Paso for sure, because we want to keep those conversations going. And I want to talk to you more, Angel, about how we're going to use art to do that. I really love work.
That, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
and you get down here and I will take you to my parents' restaurant.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll definitely be going to be seeing both of you next year.
And I'll go, if you're ever in Houston, please look me up. We'll get together. And Philippa, I know that if you're in Houston and had time, I mean, Natalie would love to organize a dinner, and we could get some pretty diverse views in the room.
I know.
You know, from our neighborhood.
Let's do it. Let's do it. All right, thanks y'all. Thanks for being in your car and calling him home there.
Good for you.
It was important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye y'all.